All right, class, we're back. We're going to be talking about medical ethics and ethics in paramedicine. And again, we talked about medical legal in Chapter 7, and obviously that is written in statute. That is written in administrative code. Ethics, a little bit different animal, and let's make sure that we go over that. Ethical problems often have legal aspects. They're most often solved in the field, and it's not solved in the courtroom. It usually begins with a circumstance that leads to a broad general rule or principles of behavior. And again, ethics is guided more by the morals, social, religious, personal standards of right and wrong. And then ethics or moral philosophy, it is a branch of philosophy that it addresses questions about morality. And this can vary between person and person, group to group, community to community for that matter. And so it's the rules or standards that governs the conduct, okay, of how a particular group of professional, how institutions should function. That's your definition of ethics, okay? And they are not the same as laws. Laws are very more focused, and laws frequently have little or nothing to say about the ethical problem. Matter of fact, it's usually where you fall into a problem is when the law says that you have to do X, Y, Z, and X, Y, Z is not morally correct. So again, a law is impartiality. It's a consistent procedure and method to identify and balance conflicting interests. Ethics can't be derived from a single religion, by the way. Religion can enhance or enrich one's ethical principles or values, but it's not a completely encompassing thing. And this is where, again, they relate to each other. Medically, is it okay to do? Legally, is it okay to do? Is it ethically okay? And hopefully we get all these things right here. Again, sometimes we get a little bit of change out there, and it can cause some problems. Ethical relativism is each person must decide how to behave, and whatever decision the person makes is okay. Ethics and morality do overlap, by the way, and professional ethics go way beyond what one individual thinks is right or wrong. Professional ethics is kind of decided by more of that community or group. Reason or logic used, again, emotion excluding much as possible, and that's kind of hard to do in our business because we get into emotional situations. Deontological method. Again, these are people that should just fulfill their duties, and that one can kind of also get you into trouble too, because then you get into I'm just doing my job, man. I'm just doing my job. So consequentialism is actions to be judged as good or bad only after knowing the consequences, as we know consequences of those actions. These are all terms that we use in describing ethics. So again, the code of ethics, and most every department I know of has a code of ethics and they usually have a list of these right here. Okay, they usually have, we're going to do it legally, we're going to do it honestly, objectively, and if you do them like this, usually you're going to be pretty good. But who's to say what is honestly? Who's to say what the integrity is? Carefulness. So again, respect mentoring, respect for colleagues. Again, these are all part of a code of ethics, and again, making sure that you're doing quote unquote the right thing. Paramedics should exemplify these, okay? And usually we agree to abide by those responsibilities of professionalism, okay? We talked a lot about that, being the model, being an example. That is practicing good ethical behavior, okay? So what is the patient's best interest, okay? Reassurance, relief from pain, prompt and safe transport. All those things are kind of a cornerstone of what we do. Written statement of the patient's desires, and the paramedic is obligated to respect the patient's desires. I truly believe that. If a person is dying, should we, and this is a major ethical dilemma, should we prolong that dying process? There are some people that think that you should do everything possible. There's other people that say this is a natural part of life. We should let this happen, okay? And again, is there a one-size-fits-all answer to that? And that answer is simply no. For those people that are black or white people, this is one of those areas that's going to drive you nuts, because what might be ethically okay in one situation will probably not be ethically okay in another. There are some state and local laws, but again, most of the time, guys, be cautious in accepting the family description of what the patient desires, by the way. That one can get you into trouble in a hurry. Hopefully they've got a last will and testament written out, do not resuscitate orders. Hopefully they've got their wishes in a written form. Me and my wife actually did this not too long ago after my mother died, and we put in there what it is that we were trying to do, what we wanted to see in the case that we got to the point that we were incapacitated. All right. Beneficence is doing good, and that's what we should be doing it. Malfeasance is doing harm. Non-malfeasance is not doing harm, and we should not do harm, period. We should be doing good, okay? That's what we should, if there's ethics, that's kind of it right there. Autonomy. The competent adult has to determine what is right within her own body. Again, justice is the paramedic's obligation to treat all patients fairly. Again, the Institutional Review Board, again, these protect the rights of the subjects of the research projects. They help resolve it. Most hospitals, by the way, have an Institutional Review Board. When there's an ethical dilemma, they have multiple people review the case and then come up with a decision. Okay, and the reason to cut out ethical problems, again, state action is a universal form. The reason that you want to cut out ethical problems is you really don't want to be in that quote unquote gray area, and you want to do, again, what is right for the patient. Okay, is the current problem similar to other problems in which you've already had and you already got a rule? If you already got that rule, follow that rule. If you don't have that rule, determine if you can buy time so that that rule can be fairly made. Do an impartiality test. Again, are you willing to undergo the procedure or the actions that's in place? The universability test, which the actions performed in other similar circumstances. Interpersonal justifiability test, can you defend your actions to others? I think that's kind of a really important thing to think about when you're dealing with an ethical problem. Resuscitation attempts. Every state, we have DNRs. If the patient is alive, the valid DNR would not prevent you from assuming basic care. Palliative care is being a good paramedic. Again, we're not resuscitating them, but we're making them feel better. Please do that. Do not resuscitate does not mean do not treat. Okay? Again, we want to make sure that we do what is best for the patient, but once they do meet the state and local requirements with wording and witnessing, the DNR order is a legal and binding document. Okay? And resuscitation should be held when those patients reach the point where they do no longer have a pulse or respirations. Okay? Every patient's entitled to reasonable measures of comfort care, and families and loved ones entitled to emotional support from the EMS provider. This is one that I would have to say that we're probably a little shallow on. Okay? By the way, if you ever want to, a lot of people think it's heartbreaking, but hospice care, I will tell you right now, having gone through it last year with my mother, I can tell you right now that these are probably some of the greatest caregivers in the world. And if you want to learn something about doing palliative care, that is the place to go in order to do it. When definitely you have ethical issues, especially when you're dealing with someone dying and lots of family members involved, it can get really, but it's amazing the work that these folks do. If you are in doubt about a resuscitation, work it. Okay? You're not only ethically but legally obligated. Follow your local protocols when you do this, and consulting medical control in this case is probably a really good idea. Your confidentiality, you need to maintain it at all times. And remember, there's they do require certain things to be reported: infectious diseases, neglect, abuse, births, deaths. Those, they are required to be reported. But the rest of it, we should, unless they have a valid court order or we've got permission to release it, we shouldn't be releasing it. What happens in the back of that truck stays in the back of that truck. okay? And again, especially if you're found that you've given out this information and it causes harm, then you're going to be liable for that, okay? You're going to be able to. And again, we should have consent on a patient. We should have their permission to treat them if at all possible, okay? Everybody said, well, they called 911, they get permission. That's not always the case, okay? Make sure that you allocation of resources. If you really stop and think about it, triage, we follow a very set of criteria, and the reason is so that we can save the most people. And again, we help the and it kind of depends. Usually for civilian triage, we use the most seriously injured get taken out first. In military triage, by the way, they take the less seriously wounded and then proceed up to the people that they can to the more severe injured. It's kind of like a reverse, but their thought process is we want to return a soldier to the battlefield, okay? And then resolving issues of scarce resources, again, there can be lots of ethical dilemmas that occur. One of the famous ones that we have is a local county commissioner comes up at an MCI and says, my mother's over here, but she's a green tag. I want her to go next. That would be an ethical issue. Yeah, she's a green tag. We'll take her here in a minute, okay? That would be a really good example. Obligation to provide care. We enact in the patient's best interest, regardless of their ability to pay. And Good Samaritan statutes, every state in the United States has got it. You're protected from liability if you are working as not getting paid and you're working for the intent. Make sure that you're teaching paramedics, act as a preceptor. That's part of your duty, is to teach the next generation coming up. Teach them how to do the job, okay? By the way, you're going to find out you become a lot better paramedic when you do that. Again, professional regulations, we got to make sure that we know them and follow them. And again, an employee or volunteer paramedics must answer to the EMS system, okay? So again, make sure that you are following the rules and make sure that you're going out and spending time with your medical director, your supervisors, the community. All of these things are very important. Knowing the docs, again, where you can call the doc up and the physician orders, sometimes they do something and it doesn't sound right. And you have a responsibility to let that doctor know, I don't think this is the right thing to do in this situation. Every now and then you're going to receive some flack about that. But again, do what's in the patient's best interest, okay? But so sometimes they will order things, it's quote-unquote medically acceptable, but it's not in that patient's best interest. And you should let your intentions and disagreements known. By the way, disagreement with physicians, orphan, they very rarely happen. I mean, like, very, very, very rarely, okay? Very, 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 very rarely. And usually with a good communication with your doctor, with your medical director, it's not a problem at all, okay? Usually you can talk to them and they'll go, what do you want to do? I want to do this, this, and this. Okay, go ahead and do it. I got a really bad burn patient here. I've already given them 2 mics of fentanyl, 2 mics per kilo of fentanyl. They're not doing good. Can I give them another 2? Can I give them another 200? And they'll usually say yes if you've explained yourself and you've got a good rapport with that doc. Now, your research, again, paramedics, local protocols. The goal of research, guys, is to make the system better, okay? Decide what is and is not working. So, again, make sure if they are in a research project, you got to make sure that you gain consent for that, by the way. Not having consent and including them is a kind of a no-no in the research world, all right? So, again, your ethics, again, there's not it's more of a morality problem than you're actually breaking the legal definitions and statute. So try to remember that. Again, something can be legal, but not necessarily ethical. And try to keep that in mind. Do what's best for the patient. Usually you stay out of trouble with that. All right, guys, we're going to talk to you on the next one.